Hello, everyone. Welcome to Food, Nutrition, and Wellness. I'm Duane Rigsby. I have Dan Remley on the line. Again, as we're kind of going through all this times and changes, we're meeting everybody remotely. Dan, we're going to be talking about some stress relieving, some anxiety things. I know you have some slides that we're going to go through, but can you give us a minute or so to give us a little description of what you're talking about and some things we can do?
Sure. We're going to talk a little bit about ways we can recognize signs and symptoms of stress, and then how to manage stress effectively for our overall health and well-being.
All right, great. So you've got some slides for us. If you want to go ahead and get those going, we'll look at our first slide and we'll proceed into how to stop stress and maybe living a little smarter, if you would.
Okay, well, the statistics say that in today's age, 1/3 of Americans are living with extreme stress. So that's quite a lot of people. And I would imagine this number is even higher now with our situation with the pandemic. It's very, very stressful for people. We're socially isolated. We have a lot of us are experiencing financial loss. Some people have lost loved ones. So this is a very, very hard time for us. And it's important that, we recognize some of those even minor stressors in our life. I just mentioned some major stressors, but there's little things that we experience day to day that can, if we don't manage them, they can add up and they can really affect our health. And so we'll talk about what some of those things are as well. So are you feeling stress? And 48% of Americans believe that their stress has increased over the past 5 years. And again, this is probably even higher in today's world. And, one of the problems in today's world is that we wear many hats. We have many roles with our jobs. Sometimes we have to multitask. Sometimes when we come home, we put on our spouse hats, we put on our parenting hats, sometimes our grandparenting hats, sometimes we're caregivers. And so taking on so many tasks at once can be very stressful for us. So I want you to maybe take some time to reflect. What are some of your significant stressors in your life? Duane, do you have any stressors that you want to talk about right now, or do you have anything that stresses you out? You can think.
Well, since I do a little technology work, technology tends to stress me out sometimes, as far as when you just run up on things you can't fix. And you don't know what to do about them right at the moment. So that tends to put a little stress on people. And then obviously, financials, health is probably the two other big factors that everybody deals with.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's see how your stressors compare with the top seven sources of stress. And these were in 2012, but they're probably very similar today. So personal health problems, you mentioned that. Family health problems, worrying about others, relationship issues, relationships with spouse and kids and grandparents, and family responsibilities was number 4. The economy, that might even be higher now. Work responsibilities, and then number 1 stressor was money. So I want to address some myths associated with stress. And so the first myth we'll look at is stress is the same for everybody. And you may think about different personality types. There's the type A personality and there's the type B personality. Dwayne, what do you think you are? You think you're a type A or a type B? You know the difference between the two?
I guess give me a little bit more definition. A and a B, yeah.
So type A personalities, maybe more high strung, worries more, just generally stressed out more often. Type B is maybe a little bit more laid back. Some people are kind of in between too. I'm probably more of a type
I would
person.
definitely call me an AB then.
Okay, sure. Well, there are type A personalities and there are type B. So type B personalities tend to internalize stress a little bit more. Type A personalities tend to outwardly express stress. And so everybody does see situations differently and interprets situations differently. And so everybody responds to stress a little bit differently too. So some people have negative attitudes or they're irritable when they're stressed. Maybe they have sleep problems. Maybe they have headaches. There's body responses, more physiological, such as muscle tensions, maybe a twitching eye, fatigue, those types of things. So everybody interprets things a little bit differently and then responds differently. But the point is that everybody is different. There are general personality types that you have type A personalities that maybe experience stress a little bit more often and they express it a little bit differently. And then you have the type Bs. And there's some people that are in between as well. So here's the second myth. Stress is always bad for you.
I would agree with that.
You would agree with that?
Absolutely.
Well, actually, stress is useful at times. And, if you think about a burning building, and so if you don't experience stress and you're in a burning building, that could be problematic, right? So you may not be as quick in your response to get all your loved ones out of the house, to get any valuables, to get your pets out. However, if you experience stress, then you're gonna take care of yourself, right?
Yeah. Definitely.
Think of kind of like a violin string. I don't know if you've ever played a string instrument, but if you're, if the tension is too tight on the string, it's a little bit raspy. But if it's, if it's too dull, it's a little bit raspy. If it's too tight, it's kind of a shrill, and the string can actually break. And so you kind of want to have those strings that are sort of in between. And that's how we need to think about stress. Too much is not a good thing, but too little can be a problem as well, because, we do have to be responsive to those situations, those fight or flight situations that require us to get off our butts, right, and get moving. So what about stress is everywhere and you can't do anything about it? That's there are things that we can control in our life, but there's things that we can't control. And it's important to kind of recognize those things that we can't control. One thing that we can do, though, is plan and prioritize. And so what I try and do every day before work is to develop a checklist. And I don't know if you do that, Duane, or not, but having a checklist kind of helps me focus on each task and then helps prioritize things that need to be done. And so that's kind of a way to manage stress. So planning and prioritization can certainly help with stress. And there's different ways that we can cope with stress as well.
I always find, Dan, when I try to start a task or a list, like you're saying, I always I like making lists, but sometimes they tend to not pan out. They usually get shot down within usually the first hour of work because there's always obstacles or problems or things break.
Right. And so a list might work for me, but it might not work for you. And so everybody's a little different. And so strategies to address stress might be different. What about this stress? No symptoms, no stress.
Sounds good to me, I guess. Symptoms, no stress. That just means you're sitting out on the porch relaxing, right?
That's a myth, actually. Some of us, like me especially, tend to internalize stress. I can remember when my daughter was sick. She had a bone infection, and I tried to tough it out. I didn't really take care of myself. I was worrying, but I didn't think I was stressed. But all of a sudden, because of all this internalization, I was actually having these physical manifestations of stress. I remember my scalp itching all the time. I remember my wrist hurting. I remember being tired. And I spoke to my sister, who's a counselor, and she said, "Yeah, you have some anxiety issues." And I actually had to go on meds because I wasn't recognizing stress. And so sometimes we might not have the heartaches and the headaches, and we might not recognize that we're worrying a lot, but we are stressed. And so it's very important to be in tune with our bodies and recognize those stressors and recognize how we respond to stress.
Now, Dan, would you have to go to your medical doctor to first find that out, or
I did. I saw my wrist was hurting a lot, so I actually saw a chiropractor, and they gave me some advice, although it didn't help, and went to some doctors, and my sister was the one that said, you might have some anxiety issues. And so I think I saw a doctor and talked to the doctor about it. And she prescribed some medications. This was a while back, but it was a very stressful time in my life. But that was the first time I made the connection between the mind and body, and I didn't really recognize it before. I just thought I was this laid back, tough guy, that could soldier through everything. But I think sometimes not crying or not acting out stress can be a problem. And then you don't really recognize that you have stress.
Definitely understand that. So I tend to agree. Probably there's a lot of people that stress up where you don't realize it. And I
Right.
think that has to do, like you said, a lot with your health. And it can be a major factor, and I think I tend to agree that you should have your doctor think about looking at that on a semi-regular basis, probably.
And definitely little major anxieties can add up to, and they can lead to a full-blown depression. So make sure that's why stress really does need to be managed long term. So there's kind of these major symptoms of stress, and then there's minor. And so like a major symptom might be financial, like losing your job, obviously, or having a health crisis. But there are little minor symptoms of stress too that, again, if you don't really recognize them and deal with those minor symptoms, then you can really those could lead to larger health problems, mental and physical. And so it's important to pay attention to little headaches or even stomach aches, for example, that you might be experiencing from time to time. Sometimes we just sort of blow those off as maybe situational, but they could be related to stress as well. And so it's important to recognize any of those little symptoms. They could be warnings that maybe our life is out of control and that we need to take some action. So take a few minutes to consider your own stress style. What do you think, Duane? How do you respond to stress?
Well, I would say I'm one to tend to bottle it up mostly. So
you and I are alike that way, I think. some people don't cry. I know my wife says, "Why don't you ever cry?" And that's one way to relieve stress. Although I think some people cry more than others, but some people outwardly express their stress, and others internalize it. And so, but there's different reactions to stress, and so there's those physical reactions. So you can think about headaches and backaches, chest pains, heart palpitations, high blood pressure. Maybe your stomach becomes upset, sleep problems. And I think I've been reading that a lot of people are having sleep problems during this age of COVID. But there's those emotional symptoms. And so people could be feeling anxiety, worrying a lot, being irritable, being depressed, being angry, kind of being unable to concentrate. Those are also emotional. And then there's those behavioral responses to stress. And so that might include using drugs or using food to deal with stress. And so think about times when we're anxious or we're sad or we worry. What kinds of foods do we eat? What kinds of foods do you like when you're stressed? Can you think of something?
Probably milk and cookies.
Yeah.
Oreos or some fan of that.
Yeah, foods that are sweet, that they help us feel better immediately. I think of just like a milkshake or something like that. That would ice cream. And that helps me feel better in the short run. But long term, if I eat too much of those, if I eat too many of those foods, that doesn't make me feel so good. So those can be immediate fixes, but they don't. Over the long run, obviously, it drags us. Those foods drag us down. So we've got to be very cautious about emotional eating and eating when we're not hungry, especially, but just to eat to make ourselves feel better. And that can lead to weight gain and diabetes and all those problems. Some people cope with stress by using drugs and alcohol too. And so that's important to recognize. Other people act out and they have conflicts with people, significant others in their lives, their spouses and that type of thing. They get irritable. They may have cry spells. So those types of things. There's different ways that people deal with stress. So what are some things that we can do to relieve stress? And relieving stress is really important because it affects so many aspects of our lives in terms of our personal relationships, our job satisfaction. Stress can have an impact on our overall life satisfaction, really. And so really very important that we think about ways that we can, relieve stress. So what are some things that you do, Duane, to cope with stress in your life?
Usually when stress hits me, I try to go out and just stop, if I can stop doing whatever is causing that, whether it's a computer problem or somebody, maybe just stressing you out, is I tend to just walk away and I tend to go do something else, just get my mind off of that particular problem. And then it kind of clears up to me. But I'm sure there's other people that deal with it much differently, whether it could involve alcohol or drug abuse, even, I'm sure.
Or smoking cigarettes would be another one. Yeah, there's different ways that we can react. There's those negative behaviors that you just mentioned, and like emotional eating, we talked about that. Poor diet, smoking, alcohol use. Or we can choose those positive behaviors. And so one positive behavior is just reaching out to another person. And so it could be a friend, it could be a colleague, and talking to them. So we know from science that relationships and having those social connections can, talking to other people about anything, having those people that we can talk to that can really help relieve stress. And so reaching out, it's hard to do that in person today and age, but we can always reach out, through our technology on the phone, those types of things. And certainly exercise helps with stress. So we go out and we can exercise, and that's good for our cardiovascular system, obviously, but it also releases endorphins, which are hormones that can lighten our mood, that can help us feel better. And so exercise is a great, it's really can be a positive response to stress that can help, mitigate the consequences at so many different levels. So taking a break, you mentioned taking a break. That's another really positive behavior, and just taking some time for yourself. Journaling can help. So you kind of identify those stressors in your life, and actually self-talk. So learning how to make lemonade out of lemons, right? So that's a lot of that is a discipline and how we think about things and how we think about situations. And when it comes to worrying, think about how could this situation even be worse, and then how would I deal with that if it does get bad? So it's really thinking about how we rethinking about situations so that they're not as stressful. They don't appear to be as stressful. That's another way that we can relieve stress. Yeah, so we talked about the different types of stressors, and they can affect our emotional well-being, and that includes having issues with anxiety and worrying a lot, being irritable, having depression, anger, insecurity, a lack of focus. There's the kind of psychological aspects or effects, includes headaches and backaches and those types of things. And then there is the physical health side of things. And so those are some of the consequences of stress. And we talked a little bit about positive ways that we can cope with stress. Taking time for yourself, journaling. And then not taking on more than we can handle. So being able to say no is very important in our lives when it comes to work or family life, just not taking on more than we can handle. And sometimes, we say yes to something and we don't realize, how, when we get to the actual task itself, how much work it actually is going to entail. There are relaxation techniques that we can use. And so, Duane, I want you to, we can kind of do this really quickly here. I'm not sure, how are we doing on time?
We've got about 5 minutes left.
Okay. So one relaxation technique, and this is really easy to do, is to sit up straight in our chairs.
Uh-huh.
And then to clench everything like our fist and just try to make every muscle in your body as tight as you can.
Yeah.
And close your eyes and hold that for about 10 seconds. Keep your breathing slow. And then release. You can shake your arm out.
Yeah.
And hopefully that kind of helps, maybe helps you feel a little bit more relaxed. Does that help you feel a little bit more relaxed?
Yeah, it feels a little different. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess, if you were having body aches or something, maybe I could feel that being stressful, and that relieves that very easily. So yeah,
it's kind of a practice of building tension and then relieving that tension. And so that's something that we can do as well. That's a relaxation technique. There is meditation activities, and there's a lot of meditation activities you can find. You can just Google or find on the internet that will guide you through a meditation. A lot of these meditation activities will help you with your breathing. So you take slow, deep breaths, and then maybe you visualize a situation where you have no stress in your life, and you think about where you are, who you're with, smells and sounds, and things, a situation that would be completely relaxing to you.
Mm-hmm.
And so taking a few minutes every day to just almost like close your eyes and breathe slowly, inhale and exhale very deeply,
Mm-hmm.
and play some very calming music that can be helpful. And then thinking about a situation that's very calming, relaxing. So that can be another way that we can deal with stress. But that's they're pretty. I mean, you can Google it. We have mindfulness training and extension too. So if you're interested, look to your local extension office and see if those opportunities, those classes. We do have videos too on mindfulness. So that's all about deep breathing, kind of meditating, and that's a great way to address stress in your life as well.
Now, Dan, we've got just a minute or so left. Is there places that we can find more information, and anything else that we can go look up on all this stress real quick?
Yeah, well, just like anything, anytime when I look for information, I want to make sure that it's research based, and so when I'm on the internet, I always look for like the .edu, meaning that it's from a university source or an organization like a nonprofit organization. Some types like the Mayo Clinic, for example, has really good information. I would be cautious about .coms because they're trying to sell you something that may or may not be research based. There's good products out there in terms of helping you address stress, but I always look for educational, nonprofit organization, government resources.gov.org, .edu. So
Great.
I think that's general guidelines that in extension, we try to be evidence-based, research-based. And so that's just a good word of advice when looking for things on the internet.
Well, Dan, I really appreciate you talking about this.
I'm not an expert in this, and we just touched the tip of the iceberg. And so there are experts out there that have more experience in this area. And so would encourage everybody to look up information and seek help too. I mean, there's counselors out there. There's medical professionals that can help, but it's important that we just need to be very mindful of stress and how our bodies react to stress, how we react to stress.
Absolutely. Well, Dan, we're out of time. Maybe we can cover this on another show, maybe extend it. But for Dan and myself, we hope everybody the best, and we'll see you next time on Food, Nutrition, and Wellness. Thank you.